Hey heroes, and welcome to another howling episode of History of the Marvel Universe. This channel is sponsored in part by Patreon supporters. If you would like to contribute and vote in monthly polls that help decide what topics get covered on the channel, then you can sign up for an amount of your choosing over at patreon.com/MaryMarvelite. The link is in the description along with other places you can find me. Nicholas Joseph Fury was born in Hell's Kitchen, Manhattan sometime in the late 1910s. His father, Jack Fury, was a celebrated pilot who clashed with the notorious Red Baron during the First World War. The oldest of three siblings, Nick reached his teenage years during the Great Depression, raised by a stepmother who loved him as her own. Prone to getting into scrapes, Nick and his brother Jacob often had confrontations with the nearby East Street gang. He also became close friends with a boy named Red Hargrove, who attended the same church. After finishing high school, Nick and Red joined a traveling air show called Finley's Flying Circus, where they both became talented stunt pilots. But in the spring of 1940, Nick Fury met a man who would change the course of his life forever, Lieutenant Samuel Sawyer. While born in America, Sawyer had joined the British Army to help oppose the aggression of Nazi Germany. And so he met Fury and Hargrove when the two were hired to provide British troops with parachute training, and was impressed by their ability and moxie. In May of that same year, Sawyer was tasked with extracting a British agent during the German invasion of the Netherlands. Needing to use a private plane for the job, Sawyer approached Fury and Hargrove and convinced them to volunteer for the mission. The two men agreed, and due to Sawyer's grim demeanor, Hargrove gave him the ironic nickname Happy Sam. The trio made it to Holland, but their plane was damaged by enemy fire and forced to crash land. Surviving the rough landing, the three investigated their surroundings and came upon a traveling circus, as well as its owner, a strong man named Timothy Aloysius Cadwallader Dugan, better known by his nickname Dum Dum Dugan. An American as well, originally from Boston, Dugan helped Fury and his allies evade the Nazis and complete their mission. And after that, Dugan decided to follow Sawyer's example and joined up with the British Armed Forces. Nick Fury and Red Hargrove, meanwhile, returned to the United States and enlisted in the U.S. Army, with Fury quickly reaching the rank of sergeant. The two were stationed in the Pacific and were present when Pearl Harbor was attacked by Japanese forces in December of 1941. Fury survived, but his childhood friend was struck down by enemy fire and perished. Of course, in the wake of this attack, the United States officially became embroiled in the Second World War. As a result, both Sawyer and Dugan were reassigned to the U.S. Army Rangers, the American equivalent of the UK's Commandos. A celebrated demolitions expert, Sawyer went on to perform countless acts of valor while working to cripple Nazi defenses in North Africa. He regularly turned down field promotions, not wanting to be stuck behind a desk, but eventually a serious injury forced him to retire from the front lines. No longer able to fight himself, Sawyer accepted a promotion to captain and became the commanding officer for Able Company, an American army unit based in the UK. As such, it was his duty to work with military intelligence to assemble A Company's first attack squad, a special team of rangers with diverse combat techniques tempered by military precision. While it took considerable effort, Sawyer ensured that Sergeant Nick Fury would be this squad's field leader. Of course, Dum Dum Dugan was also selected to join, and so now let's introduce the other members of the first attack squad. First, we have Robert Rebel Ralston. Born in Louisville, Kentucky around 1920, Ralston came from a wealthy family but left a lucrative career as a horse jockey to enlist in the armed forces after Pearl Harbor. Typically armed with a machine gun and grenades, he was also exceptionally skilled with a lasso, which he could imaginatively employ in combat. Next, we have Jonathan Jr. Juniper. Graduating from an Ivy League school just as World War II was beginning, Juniper voluntarily enlisted in the armed forces and became a B-17 tail gunner. In addition to shooting down 10 Nazi planes before being chosen for the first attack squad, he was also proficient with knives and explosives. There was also Gabriel Jones, an African-American man from Harlem. His inclusion on an otherwise all-white squad was considered highly irregular at the time, as Army units were not yet racially integrated, but Sawyer is known to have been far more progressive than many of his contemporaries and had carte blanche on who he could choose. Fury was similarly open-minded and didn't care what color a man's skin was, as long as he was as eager to fight Nazis as he was. Growing up in 1920s New York, Jones was a talented jazz musician who owned his natural aptitude for trumpeting by studying under early greats like Louis Armstrong. One of his mentors was a drummer named Danny Belliman, and the two became a celebrated jazz duo and close friends. Both men enlisted in the Army after World War II started, but their assignments separated them before Gabriel's courage and skill as a marksman caught the attention of Sawyer and Fury. Through Special Army classes, Jones also studied world music, notably classical German composers. He typically carried a bugle into battle, using it to confuse enemy troops by memorizing and duplicating their bugle calls. Next we have Izzy Cohen, a Jewish master mechanic and demolitions expert from Brooklyn with a love of machines and a heavy heart for what was happening to his relatives in Europe. Finally, there was Dino Manelli, an Italian-American swashbuckler who starred in a number of Hollywood films but changed his name and enlisted in the Army as a way of serving the country that he had grown to love. Of particular value was his ability to speak German well enough to fool a native speaker. The various squad members soon got to know each other over 6 weeks of intensive training until they were ready for their first real field mission together. This came in the fall of 1942 when the 1st Attack Squad was sent to retrieve a British rocket scientist from Nazi-occupied France. During this mission, they hijacked a German sound truck and used it to echo the sounds of their voices and gunshots, tricking the enemy soldiers into believing there were far more of them than there actually were. The howl they yelled while doing this quickly became the squad's trademark battle cry. Following the successful completion of this mission, Fury's Ranger Squad was honorarily granted the rank of Commandos in the British Armed Forces. And so, having been told of the sounds they made during the mission, Happy Sam Sawyer gave them the code name the Howling Commandos. Fury and his Howlers went on to have a long and storied career throughout the war, with more missions than we could possibly touch on here. While they typically got results, even this legendary unit was not immune to tragedy. Their first casualty was the 19-year-old Junior Juniper, who was caught by enemy fire during one of their early battles in Germany. Sometime after that, Dino Manelli was injured during a parachute training exercise and temporarily hospitalized. 2 men down and needing someone fluent in German to replace Manelli, the Howlers were joined by a man named George Stonewell for their next mission. However, it quickly became clear that his values set him apart from the rest of the squad when he took an immediate dislike to Dino Manelli and Izzy Cohen simply because of their ethnicities. While he was relieved to meet Rebel Ralston and Dum Dum Dugan, he flatly refused to even sleep in the same barracks as Gabe Jones. Quickly realizing what was happening, Fury laid down the law, declaring that there would be consequences for Stonewell if he so much as looked at Izzy or Gabe funny. During their mission in North Africa, Stonewell was injured when he took some shrapnel, but was pulled to safety by Cohen, and ultimately recovered after Jones volunteered to give blood, the two sharing a rare blood type. Stonewell transferred out of the Howlers after that mission, and while his racist views didn't exactly disappear overnight, he did leave behind his PO number so he could stay in contact with Izzy and Gabe. After that, Manelli fully recovered, and the Howlers were joined by a permanent replacement for Juniper, a British commando named Percy Pinkerton. While mocked by American soldiers who saw him as meek and foppish because of his accent and mannerisms, it soon became clear that Percy, or Pinky as he would soon be known, was much stronger and more capable than he initially appeared. In truth, Pinkerton came from a family with a proud tradition of armed service and spent his early adulthood attending distinguished military academies to please his parents. However, Percy also grew up wealthy and preferred to spend his time with attractive women and expensive cars. This caused him to fall behind in his studies, and eventually he was forced to resign while his older brother Reginald graduated with top honors. Ashamed of his failure, Percy Pinkerton enlisted as a private at the start of World War II and became a British commando solely because it was the most dangerous assignment he could get. Of course, he ultimately proved himself in combat, leading to his induction into Able Company's first attack squad, the Howling Commandos. In their first mission with Percy on the team, the Howlers successfully defeated the notorious Nazi scientist Baron Heinrich Zemo. It was after that when a disgraced Zemo began hiding his face behind his infamous pink hood. Throughout their storied career, the Howlers faced a number of other infamous foes, like Colonel Klaue, father of the sound-powered supervillain Ulysses Klaue. However, one of their earliest, and easily their most persistent foe, was Baron Wolfgang von Strucker. After several encounters with the Howlers, Strucker assembled his own team to counter them, the Blitzkrieg Squad. Of course, his most infamous accomplishment came at the end of the war when he took over an ancient secret society, at the time based in Japan, and transformed it into the modern incarnation of Hydra. In the meantime, Captain Sawyer continued to head Able Company throughout the war, although there was a brief period lasting less than 2 weeks when he was called away for detached service. During this time, he was replaced by Captain Richard Flint, who had a reputation for being tough on his troops. Flint was initially dubious of Fury and the Howlers, but after leading them into battle personally, he came to respect their abilities. Of course, it should be noted that while they may have been the first, the Howling Commandos were not the only attack squad under Happy Sam Sawyer's command. The second were led by Sergeant Bull McGivney, and known by the code name the Maulers. While ultimately allies on the warfront, the Maulers and the Howlers clashed regularly back at base, with McGivney being something of a rival to Fury. There was also the Nisei Squad, a unit composed primarily of second-generation Japanese Americans. One of these soldiers, Private Jim Morita, befriended Fury and aided the Howlers on an unofficial mission while separated from the rest of his squad. Another group later assembled by Sawyer was the Missouri Marauders, led by Sergeant Bob Jenkins and made up of soldiers that had been recruited from the National Guard and given commando training. Of course, Fury and the Howlers also had plenty of allies that didn't work directly under Sawyer. For example, there was the veteran submarine officer Captain Simon Savage, who Fury typically referred to simply as the Skipper. As commander of the USS Seawolf, Savage often assisted Fury and the Howlers as they traveled between the UK and mainland Europe. He was later transferred from the Navy to the Marines and put in charge of his own team, the Leatherneck Raiders, which were under the purview of Commander Arnold Morton and based in Sydney, Australia while operating in the Pacific in 1943. On several occasions, the Howlers also fought alongside Captain America and his teenage partner Bucky. However, a more unexpected ally came in the form of a German soldier named Erich Koenig. Born in the aftermath of World War I, Erich grew up in Hamburg with his sister Ilse. As a teenager, he became a member of the Hitler Youth alongside his childhood friend Wilhelm Hauser. When the Nazi Party promised to restore Germany's position as a world power, Koenig proudly joined their armed forces in 1935 and attended a school for Luftwaffe pilots. However, with the invasion of Poland in 1939, Erich was among the Germans who began questioning the righteousness of their actions. By 1943, Erich had been assigned to serve a high-ranking officer, Dr. August Draus, and was treated as little more than a lapdog. Meanwhile, Sergeant Fury and his Howling Commandos were on a mission to destroy a weapon designed by Draus. It was during this job that Fury's left eye was hit by shrapnel from a grenade, an injury that would eventually cause him to lose the use of that eye completely. After being separated from his squad, Fury was caught by German forces, and Draus ordered Koenig to execute their prisoner. However, Fury could tell that Koenig was conflicted and convinced him to turn against his superior. In the end, Koenig defected from the Nazis and helped Fury escape, turning Draus over to the Allies in the process. After reaching England, Erich fully cooperated with the Allies, turning over any intelligence he had in hopes of helping free his homeland from Hitler's tyranny. Meanwhile, during a mission in Greece, most of the Howlers were captured, with only Fury escaping. The Howling Commandos were transported to Berlin and set to be publicly executed by Hitler himself. In order to mount a rescue mission, Sawyer temporarily put two of the Maulers, Bull McGivney and Ricketts Johnson, under Fury's command, with Eric Koenig joining as their pilot. Despite the high tensions between Koenig and the Maulers, they ultimately worked together to rescue the Howlers, although Dino Manelli was once again injured in their escape. With Manelli out of action and taking time to recover, Koenig was given special clearance to join the Howlers in his stead. In his first official mission as a Howling Commando, Eric encountered his old friend Wilhelm Hauser, who had remained loyal to the Nazi regime. Still caring for his friend, Eric tried to reason with him, but Hauser refused to listen, ultimately resulting in his own death. Manelli eventually recovered and returned to active duty with the Howling Commandos, although Eric remained a member of the squad. And on a subsequent mission, Fury, Manelli, and Koenig also helped Eric's sister Ilsa escape from Germany. She also defected to England, where she aided Able Company and started a romantic relationship with Dino. While Eric Koenig would end up being the last permanent member of the Howlers, there were several other soldiers who later joined the squad. One was Jerry Larkin, a man who used to be in a comedy duo with Dino Manelli, before Dino became a famous film star. However, Larkin had been diagnosed with terminal cancer and secretly hoped to find an honorable death. His first and only mission with the Howlers took him behind enemy lines to destroy a German naval base. While they completed this task, Larkin put himself in harm's way to protect his squad mates and ultimately took a fatal shot because of it. After that, there was an incident in which Eric Koenig seemingly defected back to Nazi Germany. In truth, he was working as a spy for Captain Sawyer in a secret mission that not even Fury knew about. During his absence, he was replaced by a fresh recruit named Private Dwayne Wilson. Although his training was technically incomplete, Wilson initially seemed competent and courageous on the battlefield. However, as their mission went on and the danger he was in became more and more evident, Wilson began to crack under the pressure. Things came to a head when he abandoned his allies in terror and fled into the forest. He did ultimately return and confessed to his desertion, leading to a court-martial hearing. Fury spoke in his defense, arguing that he never should have been sent into combat to begin with, but Dwayne Wilson was nonetheless sentenced and executed by firing squad. Koenig's next replacement was Sergeant Hans Klaue, a German who fled to the United States with his parents when his family was persecuted by the Nazis in 1938. Still a teenager at the time, Klaue completed high school in America and enlisted as soon as he graduated. Still believing that Eric had betrayed his trust, Fury was dubious about adding another German to the squad, leading to more than a little tension between him and Klaue. Nonetheless, at Sawyer's command, Klaue was put in charge of the subsequent mission to retrieve Koenig from behind enemy lines. While this job was successful and an enemy rocket base was disabled and destroyed, Sergeant Klaue sadly lost his life in the explosion. It was soon revealed that Koenig had been working for Sawyer the entire time, and after proving himself to Fury and earning his trust once again, Eric was welcomed back into the Howling Commandos. Sometime after that, the Howlers received one more addition, the varsity football star Fred Jones. Despite making All-American and having the opportunity to go pro in the NFL, Fred decided to enlist and serve his country instead. He joined Fury and the Howlers in combat, quickly proving himself on the battlefield. Fred was subsequently on the squad when the Howlers attempted to capture Hitler's future wife, Eva Braun. However, that mission ended in failure, and Fred Jones lost his right leg below the knee as a result of his injuries. Sometime after that, Happy Sam Sawyer assembled yet another unit, one primarily composed of military convicts, the Deadly Dozen. Dum Dum Dugan was assigned to train and lead this group, joined by fellow Howlers Percy Pinkerton and Dino Manelli. After a successful mission, Dugan returned to Fury's squad, and command of the Deadly Dozen was entrusted to the former boxer Michael Lee Kelly, better known as Combat Kelly. Soon rejoined by Pinky and Dino, the Howlers resumed fighting together and participated in a number of key battles, including D-Day, the Battle of the Bulge, and the Battle of Berlin. However, constantly being in close quarters with Nick Fury and fighting alongside him would have other unexpected consequences for Izzy Cohen, Dum Dum Dugan, Gabe Jones, Eric Koenig, Dino Manelli, Pinker Pinkerton, and Rebel Ralston. You see, relatively early in the war, during a mission in France, Fury was separated from his squad and badly wounded by a landmine while evading a Nazi patrol. He was found by French partisans and brought to a doctor named Berthold Sternberg, who treated his injuries and saved his life. Unbeknownst to Fury at the time, however, Sternberg also injected him with a compound called the Infinity Formula, a substance designed to dramatically slow the aging process. After the war, Fury was contacted by the doctor and learned that he needed an annual booster or else he would rapidly age before his time. For decades, he was forced to buy additional doses of the Infinity Formula from Sternberg before eventually obtaining its secrets for himself. However, repeated exposure to Fury's blood during the war endowed the other Howlers with a similar, if less pronounced, effect, causing them to remain fit and healthy as they aged, but without the need for regular injections. The Howling Commandos disbanded after World War II, but were reunited during the Korean War in the 1950s. Rebel Ralston maintained contact with costumed heroes he'd met during the war and helped found the 1950s incarnation of the V Battalion. Moving to Texas, Rebel became a U.S. Senator and used his position to secretly support the V Battalion and openly fought for civil rights. As for Nick Fury, after World War II, he worked with the OSS before joining the CIA, eventually reaching the rank of colonel. Eventually, an injury exacerbated his old war wound, causing him to lose the use of his left eye permanently. He donned his trademark eye patch and, not long after that, was tapped to head the international espionage agency SHIELD. In his ongoing war against the terrorist group Hydra, he recruited Dum Dum Dugan and Gabriel Jones to fight beside him once again. However, during an early battle, Dugan was hit in the chest by a stray bullet and fatally wounded. Desperate to save him, Fury had Dugan's body preserved and placed into suspended animation. From there, his consciousness was projected into a realistic robotic duplicate of his original body, a life model decoy, without Dugan ever even knowing. Meanwhile, the Howlers gathered together once again, this time for an unofficial mission in Southeast Asia. They reunited with Sam Sawyer for the job, who by this point had attained the rank of general. The squad was also joined by a young but promising SHIELD agent, Jasper Sitwell, who was a longtime admirer of the Howling Commandos. After that mission, Eric Koenig also joined SHIELD, where he continued putting his piloting skills to good use. He and Gabe Jones continued to fight the good fight until both tragically met their end in combat. Izzy Cohen, meanwhile, retired from active duty to enjoy civilian life with his wife and 3 children. Putting his mechanic skills to good use, he could usually be found at his family-owned garage in Brooklyn. Dino Manelli returned to show business, first as a TV actor and then as a musical act in Vegas before eventually passing away. Pinky Pinkerton similarly retired from adventuring to open a gentleman's club in London and lived a long life before eventually passing as well. Of course, even in their old age, Izzy, Dino, and Pinky kept in touch with Fury and the others, aiding them whenever they could and earning honorary status as SHIELD agents. As for General Sam Sawyer, he remained a military man well into old age, and was eventually abducted by a robotic duplicate of Baron Strucker as part of a scheme to steal a B-52 bomber. Nick Fury and Captain America intervened, but when the Strucker robot threatened to self-destruct, Sawyer threw himself onto the machine in an attempt to stop it, and was fatally wounded. General Sawyer died, his final words being that he was proud of Fury and the Howling Commandos. He was buried in a cemetery near Arlington, Virginia, where a simple service was held by those who came to pay respects to their commander and a friend. And while many of them may be gone, that is the story of the greatest wartime fighting unit to ever grace the Marvel Universe, the Howling Commandos. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share it on your favorite social media. As always, the issues referenced in this video are listed in the description below if you would like to read them for yourself, as well as links to other places you can find me. Let me give a special shout out to all of my Patreon and Ko-fi supporters, Twitch subscribers, and YouTube members who help make the channel possible. By signing up for any ongoing amount on any of these platforms, you will get your name in these special thanks here, but Patreon is the one that helps determine what topics get covered on the channel via monthly polls. That being said, if there is anything in particular that you want me to talk about, be sure to let me know in the comments. But that is indeed all I have for you this week, and so until next time, true believers, Excelsior!